You have one task in the first 60 seconds. It costs nothing. Almost no one does it. This is about the smallest completed action of your day and why it quietly decides the next 20. A 4-star admiral once stood in front of a graduating class and told them, if they wanted to change the world, to start by making their bed. Not a metaphor, not a warm-up story before the real advice. The literal instruction. He'd spent a career training Navy SEALs, and he'd watched the same pattern repeat in every brutal week of selection. The operators who finished the smallest task first were the ones who kept finishing tasks all day, through the cold water, through the sand, through the hours designed to make them quit. A made bed doesn't win a war, but it proves something faster than a war ever could. That you're someone who completes what you start before the day has even asked you to prove it. If you can't do the little things right, he said, you will never do the big things right. Most people hear that as a nice line about tidiness. It isn't. It's a claim about identity, made by a man who watched hundreds of elite candidates break, and noticed the break always started somewhere small. A clinical psychologist built an entire chapter of a best-selling book around the same instinct, phrased as a rule of his own. Set your own house in order before you go looking for something bigger to fix. Not your career, not the state of the world. The room you're standing in, right now, this morning. He argued that people reach for grand, abstract improvement. Fix the economy, fix the culture, precisely because it lets them avoid the concrete, humiliating work of fixing the one square room they actually control. Here's the part almost everyone skips. It was never really about the bed. It's about the size of the task. A researcher who has spent years studying habit formation found that the smaller and more finishable an action is, the more reliably your brain logs it as a completed win. And a brain that logs a win at 6 in the morning goes looking for the next one before you've even had coffee. The task is small on purpose. Small enough that I don't have time stops being a valid excuse. Small enough that failing at it is almost impossible, which means succeeding at it is nearly guaranteed, which is exactly why most people don't bother. It feels too small to count. That's the trap, and it's the same trap another writer on habit identified from a different angle. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. Not a metaphor either. A tally. You don't need a landslide. You need one vote, cast early, before anything else has a chance to talk you out of it. You're not actually measuring the bed. You're measuring whether today's version of you does the thing today's version of you said it would do. Before breakfast, before the inbox, before the excuses have had time to organize themselves into something that sounds reasonable. Notice what none of these people are talking about. Not one of them is talking about motivation. The admiral isn't waiting to feel inspired by his sheets. The psychologist isn't asking you to visualize a tidy room until you crave it. This is the quiet detail that separates a discipline channel from a motivation channel. None of this requires you to feel anything at all. It requires you to move your hands for 90 seconds before your mind has been consulted. That's not an accident, either. The people who study self-control keep landing on the same finding from different directions. Willpower behaves less like a mood and more like a limited resource you spend across the day, which means the sequence matters. If the first decision of your morning is a real decision, should I, shouldn't I, is it worth it? You've already spent a coin you needed for something harder later when the stakes are actually high. Make the bed a non-decision. Make it automatic. Save the coin for the meeting, the conversation, the page you don't want to write. Somewhere between the sheets you didn't bother to pull straight and the goal you keep pushing to next quarter, there's a pattern, and it isn't a coincidence. The big task you're avoiding and the small task you're avoiding are the same muscle, doing the same job, at 2 different sizes. Train it on the small one. It shows up for the large one, whether you've built the confidence yet or not. Think about the last time you actually finished something hard, really finished it on time without dragging it into next week. Chances are the morning before that finish looked orderly. Not perfect, just orderly. That's not superstition. It's evidence that the smallest room you control sets the tone for the largest problem you don't. And think about the opposite. The mornings that start scattered, the ones where nothing gets touched before you're pulled into someone else's agenda. Those are usually the days you end wondering where the hours went. You weren't lazy on those days. You just never cast a first vote, so nothing after it had anything to build on. You don't build discipline in the moment that matters most. You build it in the moment that seems to matter least, the one so small you could talk yourself out of it in half a second. And today, you choose not to. I will finish the smallest task first, every morning, without negotiating with myself about whether it's worth the effort. I will not wait for a task that feels big enough to be worth doing. I decide before I leave the room that today's version of me follows through, starting with the bed and not stopping there. Make the bed, then go build the rest of the day on top of it. If this hits something, subscribe. A new one lands here every morning at 7.